You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, welcome
Hey.
to welcome to Conversations with Coaches. My name is Jeremy. I am Jeremy West. I am your host, and with me today I have Evie Suss. Evie, you've been a coach for a while. Can you tell me a little bit about who you coach and maybe a little bit about what your core philosophy behind your coaching is?
Cool, yeah. Okay, so I coach actually a variety of people who are looking, I guess, for a change. Something in their world isn't feeling particular right at the moment. They might be moving into leadership, um, having to, I guess, explore parts of them that they've never really needed to step in. Some people I coach in a different way. I guess I've got quite a few clients with ADHD, so it's a different style of coaching would be more focus, actually finding out what is important and what defines as needing doing now. So much of working through systems, creating a structure that works for them and basically that gets them on the right track to where they want to be. And sometimes that can be figuring out with them what they really want in life. So, we can explore themes, and I do a lot of, I guess, role playing, a little bit of acting in my coaching, which seems to come into all areas.
Interesting.
And yeah,
So you said that you work with a lot of people with ADHD, and that
yeah,
kind of coaching is a little bit different. Can you explain what you mean by that?
yeah. So I've always, whatever work I've done, and I've worked as a counselor, a teacher, and a trainer, and a coach, I've always found that I've been able to do this in what capacity I do it. So I wear different hats, but usually I convert that into a scarf. So I'll be the bit of them that they struggle to be. So it might be, creating swim lanes of structure, how they best work with organizing their brain area. So much about their environment, but also reflective in the brain. So I generally work brain body behavior, structure it down. What does your brain need? What does your behavior need? What does your environment need? And it could be just going a little bit further, and we test things out, we give it a go. So sometimes, they might have a Kanban board and it's not working. One of my
A what
clients
board?
recently made Kanban. It's a Japanese form of structure that helps them sort out what's in the backlog. So there might be, let's say, sometimes there can be 50 things in the backlog and get it all out of the brain. And it's a board, and they can move the board around. They can do it in different structures. So basically, you've got three areas. You've got the backlog, doing, and we only put one thing into doing, and then we have a lane for done. And what we try and do is over accentuate the done things, because
The
there's
what things?
often a done, ticked,
Oh,
achieved, whatever
done.
their word is. Done,
Yes.
done. So a lot of them like the word done because it's simple. Some people like achieved. It depends how they define that, and they can have different words. And we over accentuate that because often in their brain, it could be they have a low dopamine release. So, you know, often, it's the jumping up and down, putting the hands up in the air. So, overemphasizing when they've achieved something, because what I find is they've already gone on to the next thing and then they're chasing that and then they're like so tired. Um, so, we try and just hold that a little bit longer if it's something they've, done, even if it's a micro, small step, and it takes a while for them to actually get into that. Um, but I feel that I see a lot more smiles. When I went, oh, there's a smile, so I feel all that happy thing when they're happy. What you reflect in your mirror. Yes.
So you're not like a psychoanalyst where people tell me that when they've had psychoanalysis done, they dig so deep into the trauma of their past that they come out of the psychologist more depressed than they went in.
No, don't really. I don't really go into in that side. I did work in psychoanalytic counselling, and it wasn't really for me. It was an area that um, didn't flow. It was heavy, and I came out not feeling great myself. So that's
Yeah,
hence why I, from that point, went more into coaching. I guess in my 20s when I was working on psych wards, as we called them then, and different areas. I worked in childline, so it was always forward focused in the moment, but forward focused, not reflecting back. And we can reflect back, but that's not generally, I would say, where my skill or energy can go very well, you know.
yeah. So I have a
Mm,
degree in psychology and results coaching certification. And what I love about
yeah,
coaching myself is that I've found that it's the positive psychology end of things where
yes.
what I find, I think regular psychology or counseling is trying to get you out of the negative state and back up to zero. But then they kind of,
Yes.
once they get you back up to zero, they're like, okay, away you go, you're fine now. And really what we want to do is get positive up to 10.
Mm. No, I agree. And I think,
Yeah.
look, there's some relevancy. A couple of my clients probably work separately with, if there is any trauma or,
Mm.
sometimes they can have a psychologist, which is great because, they're doing that particular work with them. I'm much more focused on system structure and, little tweaks that we might need to work with. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm not down
Mm,
talking psychologists. I've been to them myself. They've been quite helpful for me. It's just then I got to a point where I was not psychologically ill anymore, but
mm,
I didn't have any sense of direction. And that's where getting a coach
yeah.
stepped in and was able to take me in that positive psychology direction instead of
Yes.
just worrying. I feel like down the
Mm,
track, maybe uh,
mm,
positive psychology is kind of a newer field of research, and maybe uh,
yes.
professional psychologists will start taking on some of that
Mm,
positive side that
mm,
coaches do now. But right now,
mm.
coaches are on the forefront of that, I think. Um,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, definitely. Hmm.
so what would you say is the core philosophy behind your coaching, or even just do you have a core philosophy of life for yourself?
Well, my business is AMT, which is achieving more together, and I think I've looked at where I can flow the best. I've always wanted meaningful work. I've done work that it's just work. And I've not felt, I guess, the best mentally, emotionally, and physically. And if it's just a paycheck, it's just a paycheck. So I think in the last few years, I was really getting into how do I know this is what I'm meant to do? And I guess it was a bit of a discovery of going back. So sometimes I do take my clients back to child and we discover the things that they loved in their childhood. And I think it's always been where we're achieving more together. So the moments that I remember are, being the team, doing things
Mm.
together, actually going, yes, we got it. And that's what I believe. So, my motto is a world where individuals achieve more together, because sometimes it can just be those little things. And that's really what brings me into this. So I don't really have one set. I feel like I've been reflecting on some of the tools I use in my coaching, and a lot of them, I sometimes take a word and create a new word from it. So I mess about with words, and I have a little bit
Can
of,
you give me an
I guess,
example?
extra. Yeah, so I've got some work I call the light bulb brigade. It's totally created from what I've experienced, what I've talked to people about. And I love light bulbs. I always have been fascinated with them, how they work, what the power is. We've got some really shining bright light bulbs. I think in my younger years, when you could go and get a light bulb that was red or blue or, and then green, it was like, wow, you've got light that's different color. So the light bulb brigade is really about helping people see their surroundings, people, not over analyzing, but just seeing it in a really light way of who are the brightest light bulbs around, who are the ones that maybe are dimming a bit because they're struggling, and where can I connect my power, where can they connect their power, and we look at it in a different dimension that actually is not too draining for some of my clients, and it can be like they can see a light bulb shining brightly, but it might be someone in another department or another area of the business, and for some reason they work well together, um, and they form an alliance, and it's like, this is my sort of person to be around. And we talk about it in the sense of, well, what do you feel when their light bulbs on? So we have a bit of fun with it, we play with it, and we have definitely a lot of laughs with that. So and it helps them reflect it in, I guess, an easier way, not taking it too serious, but also trying to understand, because I think there's a lot of, understanding that a lot of my clients need to figure out things and figure out things about themselves. So yeah, I use some other tools, and this is down to one of my clients, because she had a name for herself, and we redefined that name as the Curious Questioner. And sometimes I'll use that with her permission. She said,
So,
"Yeah, please use it."
so the
There you
Curious
go.
Questioner is a name
Mm.
that she already called herself, or the name that you two came up with together for her?
Well, I asked her to redefine her name, um, and she came back and she said, "I'm going to be called the Curious Questioner." And I was like, wow.
Okay, so
Yes.
you asked her to take on
Mm.
Native Americans or American Indians. Have they, like as teenagers or adults, they kind of end up with a name that describes them, like Dances with Wolves? Is that
Ah,
sort of
yes.
what you've done?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, and it's totally
That's a good idea.
created by them. Yeah, and they use that name and they identify with that new name, and it helps them, where they might fall into a behavior pattern of just resurfacing the name, or, often, we'd look at, well, what would the curious questioner say to you? Or what would the curious questioner be thinking?
Hmm.
Just to get into that journey of taking on that new title or whatever they want to call it.
Yeah, and
Mm. Mm.
when you ask them to choose a name,
Mm.
what's the process that you tell them to use to choose that name? Or yeah,
So I've had this, I guess, a lot of times, over the years, where they're they're identifying with part of their self that they're not actually liking, and some clients have actually had a lot of tears or frustrations, and when we've really got into what that is, um they've come to say, I don't want to own this bit anymore, I want to let this bit go. So
mm,
acceptance and where it's brought them, but also redefining where they want to go. What have you learned from this? What could you use to propel you forward? So we might take some parts of that journey into the new, and this new persona is a different way they look at a situation, because we're looking at a lot of personal awareness, And I think that's where, getting curious about themselves, more curious about their environments, that this one actually happened because it was where she would sit back a little bit longer and become more curious and, before she stepped into, I guess, any reactions. That was what that was about.
So was she defining that part of herself as a negative, like a indecisive, that she was indecisive or something?
Not
And then,
indecisive. I I guess what she was identifying was she wasn't really speaking up enough, and that's what she said. Not speaking up enough, and we want to. And I noticed this with a lot of of clients over the years that it's knowing, is this the time to speak up? And I do a lot of disc work, and if they're in the D, which is dominant, is this relevant to bring up? Is this me, something that would reflect in my values that I need to speak up? So it's often about owning their self in this process of, and liking the self. I think that's where I have noticed, this curious questioner, um, actually liking this part of you, taking this
so
on,
let me, I guess what I
Mm,
was asking is, was you said she was redefining a part of herself. Was this
mm,
before she came up with the positive title, Curious Questioner? Was this a part of herself that she was not happy with?
definitely. Yeah, yeah,
And so,
definitely.
did she have a previous? Was there a previous negative name for it?
No, she didn't really have a negative name. It was just
Right.
I guess, the reactions and some of the behavior that she was trying to shift, but
Gotcha.
she hadn't really named it. And the idea to rename was, um, I think I might have asked a question like, what if you could give this a name? What would you? And that's where we worked. And it wasn't, it took about 3 months to come up with this and move into
Oh.
this. So it's not quick fix overnight,
Mm,
as well as working on goals and exercises. So it was a good, transition in.
mm. Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, so and then what has that done for her? Like redefining that part of herself as the curious questioner.
I believe from what she said, it's coming into acceptance of, owning part of herself that, we often call, I guess I go back to some of my psychology days, that we discount. A discount is something what we, it's like often people do it between each other where they discount, a compliment, like, oh, I love that dress. Oh, well, I bought it in the op shop, you know, that
Mhm.
side,
Yeah.
instead of go, yeah, it's great, I love it. So that was part of
Although
her to
sometimes people are quite
acknowledge.
proud of the deals that they can get.
Yes, yes. They're like, yeah, it's great, isn't it? And did you know I got
Yeah.
it in the op shop as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Mm,
I find that a lot of people who are very good at listening and soundboarding for other people, um, they're
mm,
not often quite as good at taking their own advice. But can I ask you, can you think
mm.
of a personal, and it's okay if not, we'll move on to the next question if not, but can you share a personal story where implementing your own coaching advice in your own life significantly impacted your life?
Definitely. So a few months ago, I just, I'm, a collector of learning, and I've moved, obviously, I think it's probably 11, is it 11,000 miles from here to England, but it's a long way. And I've moved from Queensland to Victoria. So I've had to, be a bit more minimal and look at really what
Mm,
I could get rid of and what I could keep. And I decided my learning, I guess from being about 20, I've written, Well, actually, as a child, because I used to write lots on lots of sheets of paper, and I've always had this thing where there's lots of paper and I'm writing constantly, when I wake up and drawing, and so it's very. And what happened was I was trying to look through some stuff to say, is there anything? And I found a little book with the container work in it. And I was like, wow, I haven't used this for a while. And I started using it on myself. So it's a container. If you think about when we go for a meal, often there's too much and we take it away in a little clear container. It's can be for the meal next day. I think one thing I'm not keen on wasting food. I've never liked waste. So the container is something that we need to contain. It could be our energy, our time, and sometimes it might not be a, a time when we can address something. So the container is about putting a sticky note in the container to say it's there. And I found myself using it with my clients and going, I need to do this more. I need to do this more. And of course, it's about boundaries, but I called it the container work from my 20s. And I was like, I need to do some of this container work again. It's something that defines our space, our time, our emotions. And it was something I went, yes, I love it, because I know I can see it's on my desk and I can see the sticky note. And if it's a word or a phrase, I know it's there, but I've got a choice to keep the lid on it for now. And I've just gone back to using it.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what has that done for you?
It's actually freed me up. I feel like sometimes we can get into dynamics of, do I actually need to say anything here, or do I need to do anything? And I often reflect on the 80-20 principle myself. I'm like, where on the scale do I need to do? So it could be, it's containing my time. When it's enough, that's enough. It doesn't have to be a 10. It has to be, for me, a 7. Okay, 7's good enough. All right, tick, done.
And why is that important to you?
Well, I think sometimes we've only got so many hours in the day, and sometimes I wonder if we're actually working on what we really need to be working on, and that's okay. If we want to be creative, then give ourselves to be creative. If we're not having to do something that we go, though that's really important. Well, okay. So if I need to do this first, that can be a 7, and then I can be creative. So I think it's just the time and what you really want to spend your time on, because there's so much you can be doing. And the world's an interesting space, and there's always a lot to learn. So yeah, I think it just helps you focus a little bit.
Yeah, I heard somewhere recently that it's not about learning how not to procrastinate. It's about learning how to choose what to procrastinate, because there's always going to be way more that we want to do than we can do. And so we have to decide what's the most important things that we want to procrastinate everything else in order to get those most important things done.
That's a good way of looking at it. Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you talk about,
yeah,
go ahead.
No, it's just
Well, you
interested
mentioned,
to know what you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, when you said procrastinate, because I was like, I'm not sure if I like this word, and I never really thought of a better word to use. But
Yeah,
I think it's like, I was thinking about it in art terms, because sometimes if I put something in a different sphere, like art, because it's for me simple and I've done it a lot from a child, I actually think the procrastination is thinking and developing and actually having time out and coming back to it refreshed. So
yeah,
I look at procrastination and I'm like, I think, and I've worked with a lot of writers, and I'm like, sometimes do we need that empty space? Is it procrastination? Is it? But I don't know what word you could use. Like,
Well, I mean,
But I
talk
think they
about
should,
putting it on the back burner.
yeah, like,
And that's kind of what,
because I also,
like, you're talking about a writer might need to take a break from sitting down and writing, but in their in their unconscious or subconscious, they're actually still working on it, even if they're not conscious of it. So next time they sit
yeah,
down, it's going to be a lot easier. Yeah,
I agree, because it's still working through in some form, and it might be, I don't write lyrics or songs, but sometimes people have said they've left it for a whole year or so and then gone back to it and gone, there you go, I can see it now. I can
yeah.
feel it.
And they were like struggling to write it down, and then a year later they sit
Mm,
down and it just like comes out of them
mm,
like it's been given by the gods or whatever. Like, but really,
yes.
it's just that their unconscious mind has been working on it the whole time.
Yeah. Working in the background. It's like a bit like a computer, isn't it? Sometimes there's some work going on in it where we don't really know. But
Yeah,
yes, that's
and
mm,
I think, at least for myself, I do my best
mm,
work um,
mm,
subconsciously. So uh, I might look like I'm procrastinating or putting
mm,
off doing my assignments till the last minute, but really it's just that I know that that I am working on it. I'm working on it in my head,
yes,
and that's a lot less.
yes.
I'm working on it in my subconscious, which is a lot less stressful. And then when it's close to the deadline, sit down and put it on paper, and it comes out a lot easier than it would have if I would have just been
Mm,
trying to do it from the beginning.
mm,
But other people are different. They need to do a page a day or whatever.
yes. Yeah.
That's
And I
just
think,
me.
you know, I've talked to a lot of people about where they've wanted to, and I'm not being sexist here, but a lot of men have told me this in coaching that they want to change the way that they work. They don't want to have that last minute um, rush of a little bit of panic, a little bit of excitement. And when we've really, gone quite deep on it, what they've realized is they're actually more productive because they actually spend a lot less time. So a couple of them trialed
Yeah,
it, and it's where the emotional side of the brain, was probably panicking them a little bit because they were like adrenaline, I've got that to do, I've got that to do. But when they actually got to the task, the amount of time it took was a lot quicker. It was like because there
yeah.
was a full in, and
Uh,
I
uh,
refer to it interest it up. Yeah.
yeah. Our work tends to either stretch or compact into the amount of time we actually have to do it. So the less time you
Mm,
give yourself to do it, you'll,
mm,
you have to still give yourself a reasonable amount of time to get it done. But
yes.
basically, if you just give yourself how long it will actually take, then
Mm,
it's going to be done in that amount of time. But if you give yourself 4 times as much time, then it's going to take 4 times as much time.
I agree. Yeah. Interesting.
But everyone's different. But
Mm,
yeah, putting it on the back burner, procrastination. I don't know what I was going to say. Um, so you said a lot of your clients have ADHD. Are there any
mm.
other sort of niche type of clients, and how do you tailor your coaching philosophy to address the unique needs and goals of each individual or team that you work with?
So generally, I do have different programs, different structures. If it's more about finding where they work, sometimes it can be the work. I would say a lot more um, about doing something they've always wanted to do, whether it's write a book, go into study, change their career. There'll be some pre-work to, how they've got here and really get to understand their self and know how they work. And I think that's really important to, different stages of people's life because often 10 years have gone by and they're not the same person. So that growth, often they've not acknowledged or reflected it and they feel a different person and they maybe don't want the same things. So it can be, you know, career change, career transition, questioning things, doing things that they're going, do I really want this? So, a lot of exploration. And sometimes I find that people find that hard to go. Again, I do a lot of lean work. So in lean, we've got something called the 5 whys, and it means going really deep on something. We use it a lot in production, but also it's really good to go deep to get right to the bottom of something. And that's where we do go deep in, if they want this change, what is it really they want? Because I see sometimes people don't go after what they really want. They're a little bit hidden from what they really want. So, and a lot of people say, they come and they say, I'm not really sure what I want. So we figure that
Mm.
out in the space.
Yeah. Do you find, I've always found with my clients, the less I talk, the more they talk, the more
Yes.
they think I've, like, for example, if they come to me saying, I don't even know what I want to do. Then we spend the next hour with me just asking them questions and most of the talking being them. Then at the end, they've got an idea what they want to do, and they think that I gave that idea to them. They're like, "Thank you so much. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and you just came up with that fantastic idea that I should be doing this." And I'm like, "What? I didn't. You're the one who came up with that idea." Do you find
I
that?
think oh yeah, I do very little talking. So,
Yeah.
and I'm always really good with silence. I actually do always one voice call so I can really center on the voice. And I guess I did a lot of training on voice and phonics and different sounds. So I get them to read some sentences out and I notice which words they emphasize. So I'm really listening. And by me being able to listen more, I can hear what they're saying. And then, if it's a Teams or a Zoom call, I will be looking at a lot of eye work. I've always found eyes fascinating, and it's observing reactions. So I see the body language change when they start talking, the voice changes. Um, yeah, it's like something they're rediscovering something they'd forgotten, or they went, wow, I didn't realize I love that so much. Or they make these big realizations, they join the dots and they're like, oh wow. So I
And then
feel
they
it,
think that you
yeah.
join the dots for them, and which you have by asking the right questions. But it's amazing how much they don't realize that all the answers were inside them.
That's right. And I think because, if you think about it, and when you have coaching yourself, you actually understand what it's like to be sat in their seat. I think, definitely in my counselor training, having counseling, going deep, definitely gave me an understanding of what happens in the brain when you're being coached and what work you're doing, because we don't see what's going on beneath. So you realize sometimes it's really difficult because you're working in different areas and you just miss the dots. It's kind of like something you're just not seeing. And I've done a bit of shadow coaching, not recently, but I did some a few years ago, and that was fascinating because people don't see all of their self at times. Well, we don't because we're human, but so I think it is helping them just come in touch with things that they already know. And I always think the power of them voicing it up. So often them just vocalizing something is like a double um, acknowledgement for them, rather than just thinking it, but saying it and then saying it to someone else. It's like tripled. It reinforces, it validates some of their beliefs or feelings. And I think that's what, sometimes as humans, we don't do that enough, really.
Yeah, and they say it, but they think you've said it. But
Yes.
um,
Yes.
So what would you say for you is what's the most challenging aspect of coaching for you, and how do you navigate that challenge?
Well, recently, and I used to do this a lot, but I used to record a conversation and then get like, because I'm part of the ICF, a mentor that listens to the conversations, and I guess this goes back to teaching, and even as counselors, um, I guess when I first started to train as a counselor, we had to deliver counselling sessions in front of exam boards, so we'd get moderated, and it was quite scary. And I guess as teaching, you'd have examiners in the room listening and watching and making notes. So I've always, I feel like I've always grown up with that extra person to be objective, but actually having that to review and listen to your call afterwards and think, what could I improve? What aren't I doing? Because I think it's good to keep your practice really fresh. And, it could be just, oh, I didn't ask that question. And, it could be later on you think of. But also, you can see some patterns that you can re listen to your client, and you can say, oh, I noticed when I listened to the recording that you mentioned this quite a few times, because you can't address everything in the room always, you know. So I think that's really good to go. All right, I'm going to accept me as the coach where I am, and I'm going to look at what I can keep improving and keep working on.
So then, what are you saying is the biggest challenge?
Sometimes accepting yourself and listening to you, and you
Mm,
know, actually going, okay, I think it's the judgment. It's the judgment of, am I good enough? Um, what if I miss something? And wow, and then it's like, well, I'm human. Okay, if I accept where I am at this, what is it? Instead of going judging, what is it I want to improve? And just, refocusing on that. And I guess sometimes it is a little bit scary to, um, you know, listen to yourself. If you're not used to listening to yourself in a coaching session, it can be, and it's been a couple of years since I've done it. So I think it's good to do it every year, actually. At least, maybe 2 calls. Actually listen to them, really listen deep.
right. Okay. So your biggest challenge is, would you say, sometimes you get a bit of the imposter syndrome and you think, what am I doing here? What do I actually know? When in reality, you know that you know what you're doing, and that the questions you ask connect dots for people, and you've seen all the successes of your past clients, but sometimes, despite all of that, you still get caught up thinking that you might not be good enough.
Yeah, it's a bit like a wave. You go through times where, you might have learned something new and you bring it into your practice, and then you're looking in a different dimension at what could be improved. But it's almost like at some point, I think it's human to question yourself. I'm like, I once had this lecturer and she said to me, nerves are really good. It shows that you care. And I think there's
Mm,
something human, yes. If you didn't, and I called it nervously excited, but
yeah,
if you don't have that in you, then I'd question why you're doing it. Like,
yeah,
um, I think it's okay sometimes to judge yourself, to have that, because it's part of a process of, I believe, going, a bit deeper with your work, or just stepping back and actually saying what's happening in this space, you know?
yeah. Okay, and so the
Mm.
way that you uh, are able to navigate that challenge is to listen back to yourself. And I'm thinking, would I be correct in saying that not only do you find things that you can improve on, but would you also find that when you listen back to it, you have actually you surprise yourself and go, "Wow, that was really good. That was a great question I asked there." Or, do you find that you get surprised by
Yeah.
how well you did?
Yeah, because I think sometimes when you listen to a session and if it's sometimes mostly there are between 30 minutes and 60 minutes is the way you bring in a question that you go in at the beginning, should I ask this? But then the client wants to go deeper, so it's kind of like it's not relevant at that point because you're focused on them. And then it seems to weave in at a point where it's really a great time. And I think sometimes that trust of, always let the client lead, always let them go
Mm.
where they need to go. And, it's sometimes I feel if there is a question towards the end, I'll say, you know, I was really glad that you unpacked so much then. There was something that I was really interested to know, and I know we haven't really got a lot of time. So maybe this is something I could give you to go away and think about. And that's how I sometimes put it. And I'm like, just want to check in. Is that relevant to where you are now? And we often scale, like I'll say on a relevancy level, 10 being really relevant and one not at all. And generally it's like, 7, 8. And then that's up to them if they want to take that away. Um, they can take it away and work on it. So yeah, sometimes you just say, oh, it kind of worked really well. You know, this
Mm.
trust, this gut, this feel of, it is okay to say, I've got this question and I'm not sure if it's something you would want to look at, taking them where sometimes where you think they might want to go, is it where they want to go?
Yeah, I remember one of those times with one of my clients where um,
Mm.
I was working as a breakup coach, helping people
Oh,
sort of find their
yeah.
identity again after breaking up from a long-term relationship. And
Mm.
she said, I don't have feelings for him anymore. In fact, I hate him, blah, 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 blah. And I just stopped and said,
Mm.
okay, can I ask you a question? She said, yeah. And I said, is hate a feeling? She's like, and a
Mm.
penny dropped for her. She realized she does have feelings for him. It's not a feeling of love, but
Mm.
because she thought she had let the relationship go or whatever, and she wasn't. She was past it,
Yeah.
but she was still holding on to these feelings of hatred. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah. Great.
a penny drop moment for her,
Mm.
where we were able to
Mm.
move on from there.
Awesome. That's
Um,
good. Mm.
okay, just a few more questions, and then I'll let you go because we're getting
Mm.
close to an hour. Um, so when a client is not aware of their potential themselves, how do you identify and unlock a client's potential for them? Or how do you help them do it?
I do work a lot on feelings, so potential being, you know, is it a logical potential for them? Because it might not be. It might be based in, at the moment, a feeling of potential. And I guess that's where we do have to define what is it
Well, I
they
mean,
really want.
sorry,
Because,
if I come to you and I
yeah,
say, look, Evie, the
mm,
reason you're asking me what I want to do with my life, but the reason that I've come to you is because I have no clue. I have no ideas at all
mm,
about what I want to do,
mm,
um,
mm.
and what my potential is. How do you then help them unlock that when they have no idea?
So we'll generally we'll start on a theme, and sometimes to go deep, I start on, I'm going to give them two things and they tell me which one they prefer. So I often start
Mm,
with apple or orange, right?
mm,
And they'll give me that
apple.
and we'll work
Let's do
through.
it.
Yeah,
Let's
so
do
we'll
it.
say, so
Apple.
yeah, ap apple. Batman or Superman?
Batman.
House or apartment?
Caravan.
Cool. All right. Pink or blue?
Pink.
Cool. So from there, we'll do that for a little bit, and I usually call that a warm up. And,
Yep.
if there's a bit of resistance to start with, a few of my clients, they're like, okay, so I get them to ask me, and which is really good to see what they think to ask me. So we go into a bit of, different. So they'll ask me some, then I ask them
Okay.
some.
Apple
What's
or
your
orange?
orange
Movie or television?
movie?
Mm, clothing or uh, clothing or office supplies?
Um, Office supplies.
Comedy or theater?
Ooh, that's a difficult one. I think at the moment I'll go comedy. I feel like
Yeah,
comedy.
but see, I
Yeah.
didn't. I was just. I can see what you're doing there. I think because um, I wasn't trying to think of stuff for me, but we got to the point where
Yes.
comedy or theater came up, and those are the things that I'm into.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes, identifying, letting them have a little bit of a play, getting into that child. And, like you said, pink, I would say, what's something that you had that was pink? And then you talk about that. So it might just be, when we're really trying to figure something out and working hard, and the brain's like, I'm overtired with this. It's actually, like we said earlier, procrastination. It's maybe just time to have a little bit of fun and think of things in a different perspective. So often not trying too hard. So, and then usually I'll get that will lead into childhood, and I'll say, what
Say
are
that
the
again.
things that you loved? So we often lead from this little exercise, whether they say pink and they might have said, I had a pink cushion when I was a child, or, and we get to childhood fairly easy, and they'll talk about, what was something that you discovered in your childhood that you are really proud of, and they'll talk about something. So we'll lead in from that angle and discover the things that they feel they can be their self either in doing, um, you know, often a bit of the flow where it seems effortless, where it's just, they feel good about the self and what that's like for them. So that feeling. And sometimes it is based on feeling. Sometimes they feel, you know, they're not feeling that feeling anymore. Might be they've just grown out of something they've done or doing, or they don't feel the same way about it. So it's often bringing them where they are. And when we reflect to the future, often they struggle to go into the future. So if and I know sometimes, like, in 10 years, often you hear these questions, in 10 years, what do you see yourself doing? And
I
that's
don't
not
know where I'll
really
see
what I
myself next
do.
week.
Exactly. So we don't really focus that far ahead. We just focus on the now and what their journey's been like. And if there's any patterns, because sometimes people can have patterns in their life. I call it a bit like the drain pipe. It can be something they keep trying and then they'll go back to. So let's say they're writing, um, they haven't acknowledged themselves as a writer, and it's something they can't, they're not moving forward, but they're not letting go of it and gone somewhere else. So it's still like a little bit of attachment and figuring out what it means, and really, I guess, letting them tap into their inspiration and what something might give them, in terms of, I often talk about motivation being love, interest. Is it interesting? Is it exciting? Is that something they need? And often people want to be learning something with something they do. I'm not learning anymore in this, so I'm struggling.
Mm. I suspect
Yeah.
that would especially apply to people with ADHD, that we lose interest when we're not learning anything.
Yes, definitely. Definitely
All right,
see
because I
that.
don't know if
It's got.
you know this, I know
Mm,
because we're close
yeah,
friends, but I
yeah,
haven't mentioned in this episode that I myself have ADHD. So,
yeah, yeah.
all
And
right, well, okay, I think I have two more questions.
mm,
What is one piece of advice that you consistently find that you're giving to clients? What's one piece of advice that no matter who your client is, you just seem to always give this one piece of advice?
I don't really give advice. There's a couple of clients that have asked me for that because we don't listen to their own advice. But I think what I encourage is for them to own the self, to really tap into, and we could relate it to a movie. I've often said, what would you call the movie? What sort of a character? Because it's like a separate dimension that they can look at themselves. But who are they? And what is it really that's important, like, for them, and have a bit of fun with it, like, enjoy it. Even I do the mirror work where they talk to themselves in the mirror, and sometimes there's a bit of resistance there, but really understanding what their needs are, what they want to achieve in life, where they want to put their time, emotion, and energy in, you know.
Okay, so you don't give advice, or you don't give, specific advice on what to do with their lives, but one sort of technique
Mm.
or uh, one thing that you often suggest that your clients do is talk to themselves, maybe even in the mirror.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Have a conversation, and I do a lot of I don't do advice, but I do a little bit of teaching, is how to be their best
Mm.
coach, because
Yeah.
you know, having a coach, you can't have a coach, 40 weeks of the year every year. So they have to learn to be their best coach for themselves. And something I'm very passionate about is helping them develop their own coaching questions internally and externally. So that's a big thing we work on. So I think that they're the questions that they will, at checking points, if they've got an environment they're struggling in, they will have coaching questions that they will support themselves through, you know. Um, so that's a
I
bit
like
of an
that.
area that. Mm, mm,
It's making me think, they generally might get you for an hour a week or something. Would that be
yeah,
common?
yeah.
And
Well, actually,
that
some of them
leaves,
only get an hour every month. So
yeah.
yeah, they
So that leaves,
yeah
29 or 30 days that you're not beside them coaching them. So really,
yeah.
you're
Mm.
you're actually mentoring them on how to be their own coach.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of work here, and I've actually started writing an article in it. Um, and it's something I see more and more, how we can be our own best coach. That's the title.
Yeah, good.
Mm.
All right, final question. Well, you'll see. Um, how do you measure the impact of your coaching, and what does success look like to you and your clients?
So to start with, we'll have, I guess a set of questions, and sometimes the journey changes. The destination might not be where they originally were thought they were heading to. Things do change, but we'll have some check-in at the beginning, measuring, and I always do a measure of every session. There's usually a few questions. So measuring where someone really wants to go, if they want that promotion, if they want to speak up, if they want to step into another role, if they want to write the book, it's like usually in one thing, but it can be a series of things. But they are learning new skills on the way. So often people come and say they want to be more confident, and we've really got to define what confidence is to them.
Mm.
And confidence to everyone is totally different. So tapping into that, once we've defined what this is, then they'll set their own goals, and then we'll come back to those. We'll keep tapping in. And sometimes, it can be a goal they work on every month, but there's some others that they tick off. So they go, yeah, I did that. Like, one guy did a motivational speech. You know, other people have had promotions or left the company or gone for another job, as I say, written the book. So it can look very different, and usually it depends on what they're looking for. And sometimes it's a journey of getting to know the self better. And they might say, at the moment, I don't want to make a change, but I want to get to know a bit more about what I could possibly want in a year. That's quite
Mm.
common. They're not quite ready to take this leap, and they're doing some pre-work before they make these. I'm not sure if there'll be life-changing decisions. Often they can be. It could be studying something new, going to uni, or trying something different. Or, recently coached a guy whose kids left home because of, 20s, and he wanted to do some work in his community. And what would that look like? So, that was it. That was something he was like always wanted to do, and now it's here. He's like, I'm not sure what I want to do.
Mm.
So figuring some stuff out, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. So final question
Mm.
is there a question? I guess this is kind of a two-parter. Is there, and I've
Mm.
stolen this from Mike Kaplan's comedy podcast, Broccoli and Ice Cream. I'm going to ask you what he asks his guests at the end of every episode. Is there anything from our conversation where we went off on a tangent or anything like that, where that you feel like you didn't complete the answer and there's more you want to say on that? And the second part of the question, and the answer to these can be yes or no, it doesn't matter. The second part of the question is there, yourself and your coaching much better than I know you. You've known yourself a lot longer than I've known you, and your coaching a lot better than I do. Is there a question that I should have asked or that you expected me to ask that I didn't? And what would that be question and the answer to that question be?
Um, I know we did venture off the first part. We did venture off into different areas. I like the way to be free and just go where it takes us. So I don't know if we didn't approach something or we did, but I feel like what we said was pretty much as what happened. I was pretty
Mm-hmm.
happy with what we discussed. Um, and the other part, I think, was I expecting you to ask? I don't know. I was interested
Oh,
to know, I guess,
or not even
about
not even
forming.
expecting
Yeah.
not even expecting me to ask, but is there anything else that you'd like to say about your coaching or even just your philosophy of life or anything else about Evie and Evie's coaching that you would like to share?
Well, actually, somebody had a discussion a week or two ago. She's actually a psychologist, and it was, talking about how, you know, people feel that they can come and be their self, in the session. And what I was saying, in terms of coaching, is generally you know whether you're a good fit for the person, because you do ask for feedback. Like, do you think you could work? Do you think that we will work well together? And I guess that relationship building is really, providing a space where they can just come and be their self, but also sometimes they might need to do something different in the session. We might have they might have planned to bring something, and on the day they need to address other things. And I guess that's where they can actually say, no, I've actually got something that I need to talk about. And she was asking me if I ever worked with a client that I didn't think was a good fit. And I said, yeah, there was actually, because we didn't seem to get anywhere. Every time, she set the goals, then the things changed. And obviously, I feel, she was probably not comfortable in the space of coaching, but maybe in another few years she'd come back. She wasn't ready to face maybe that internal dialogue. So I think coaching can be good when we're able to come to this space and listen to ourselves and own parts of ourselves maybe we're not always ready to listen to or be. Um, and sometimes it can be about it just not the right person or the right fit. But often I'll say to my clients, how do you want this session to look today? I know we've got this. What's a good session look like? Or, you know, sometimes I'm like, are you the big picture person or are you the data person? Because if they're the data person and I'm the big picture, I need to adapt a little bit to make sure that we do a lot of scaling and numbering, you know? So it's finding out what works best for them as well.
Yeah. Well, that's
Mm,
actually, I love that answer because that's
mm,
exactly why I decided to do this podcast because um, they've done studies in psychology where they took the top five different theories or methodologies of psychology, whether it was psychoanalysis, cognitive behavioral
mm,
therapy, mindfulness based therapy. I don't know what the five were, but they took the top five and they pitted them against each other to see
mm.
which was the most successful. And they found that there was no statistical difference between the success
Wow.
of each of these methods. They were all comparable. But what they did
Mm,
find is that what they call the therapist client alliance, that was what made all the difference. If there was a good alliance and
mm,
relationship between the client and the therapist, that's
mm,
when there were good outcomes. And usually, it seems to me that whether it's psychologists, counselors, coaches, most people kind of fall into who they see. Um,
mm,
just whether it's word of mouth or circumstance or who they're referred to by their doctor or whatever it is. And then you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I've tried psychology, it didn't work. I tried a couple of different psychologists, it didn't work." And I think I go back to the 80-20 rule, and I think probably only 20% of the psychologists are going to be, or counselors or coaches are going to be the right fit and have the right, you know,
yes.
therapist client
Yeah.
alliance with you. So that's, I want to do these podcasts where I find out, I have these conversations
Mm,
with coaches and the listeners can, um,
mm,
just see all of a sudden they might go, oh my God, Evie sounds like exactly who
mm.
I need to talk to. But
Yes.
yeah, they now have I've just done an interview of you, a job interview of you for every potential client out there. They don't even have to do a job interview anymore. They just need to call you up and
Mm,
slide into your calendar.
mm.
But anyway, if you have
Well,
space, that is,
yeah. Yeah.
could you please plug where people can
Mm,
find you or find out about your coaching or I don't
yeah.
know. Some coaches have discovery calls that they, whatever. Just plug whatever you can plug so people can find you.
Mm, mm. So, Achieving More Together is online on www.amtsolutions.com.au. I'm not fully in social
AMT,
media.
AMT Solutions.
Yes,
So that's
AMT
um,
Solutions. Yeah,
AMT stands for
AMT
Achieving More Together.
More Together. Yeah.
Right.
And I've recently met a lot of my clients, just I guess not online, which surprises me because we're told a lot, about all socials and everything. But I still think referral, word of mouth,
Yes.
is a great power, even in today with with all our different ways of connecting and
No,
communicating. Yeah.
I think when you're experienced and you have the clients
Mm.
to refer other clients to you, give that word of mouth, then that's by far the best, and that's the best for everybody, really. But it's when
Mm.
you're starting out brand new and you don't have anybody to be
Yeah.
your word of mouth for you. That's when
Yes.
that kind of marketing is
It's a
more
good.
important.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah,
So that's
and
your
I'm
website.
also, yeah, and I'm on Facebook. And I still believe in the power of a conversation. So, yeah, I'm not on Twitter. I have recently thought, would that be a space? Because, so I I need to, but I guess, as I work with my clients, what's the one thing, you know? What's the one channel? What's the one area that you put
Yeah.
yourself in? Yeah. Cool.
So
Well,
your
thanks
web
so much.
repeat your
Yeah.
website again, please.
Yeah, it's amtsolutions.com.au.
And how do they find you on Facebook?
They can just look me up on, again, the same, AMT Solutions on Facebook. And it's Evie
Perfect.
Marie. Cool.
It's what?
I'm known as Evie Marie. So, yeah,
Evie
I usually
Marie.
work under Evie. Yeah, that you work under that
Fantastic.
name. Cool.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Everyone, if you want to find my links, just go to Linktree. It's linktr.ee/Jeremy West. Linktree.ee/Jeremy West. JeremyWest.net should go there, but sometimes that doesn't. So just share the actual address, linktr.ee/Jeremy West. Thank you, and we'll see you next time
Thank you.
on Conversations with Coaches.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank
Really
you.
enjoyed your questions. Thank you. Bye.